The Autoimmune Connection is a web series dedicated to all things autoimmune, with hosts Christina Feindel of A Clean Plate, Emma King of The Bacon Mum, Kate J. of Healing Family Eats, and Rory Linehan of The Paleo PI, interviewing new guests every episode. We're bringing patients, practitioners, friends, and family together to connect the dots between diet, lifestyle, and autoimmune disease.
I'm Christina Feindel of A Clean Plate, your host for the week, and I'm here tonight with Angie Alt and Mickey Trescott of Autoimmune Paleo and Eileen Laird of Phoenix Helix, show regulars, who it's always a pleasure to chat with, and I'm so happy to have them on again tonight. Thank you guys for coming. For our viewers that may be new to the show or aren't familiar with your work, would you like to take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourselves?
So I blog with Angie at autoimmune-paleo.com, and I'm the author of the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook, and I have both Hashimoto's and celiac disease, and I realized kind of after 10 years of being vegan that something needed to change, and I transitioned to AIP, and so a lot of what I do is just kind of help people with the practical implementation of the diet part.
Well, I'm Eileen from the blog Phoenix Helix, and I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm managing that with a personalized version of the AIP. And I also have a podcast, by the way, so if any of you are on iTunes or Stitcher, look me up, Phoenix Helix. It's all about autoimmune healing.
I'm Angie Alt. I blog with Mickey at autoimmune-paleo.com. I am the author of the Alternative Autoimmune Cookbook, which came out in December. And I'm also a health coach. So after dealing with celiac disease, endometriosis, and lichen sclerosis, I started coaching others on how to adopt the autoimmune protocol, and I do that in group settings and with individuals.
Tonight, we're all here to talk about getting started on the autoimmune protocol. As our community grows and more information on the AIP gets out there, we have more and more people finding it and beginning their experiments with diet. And every single one of them, I think, has the same exasperated, slightly panicked question: how the hell am I supposed to do this? So that's what we're here to answer tonight. I consider myself lucky that I was coming from a raw vegan diet because it was really exciting for me to get to add meat and cooked foods back into my diet. I felt like I had a lot of new flavor options to play with, and I didn't feel limited or deprived at all because I was adding those new foods in. But I know that that's not the case for most people. Most people are coming from a standard American diet or just something a little bit more mainstream, and are feeling really frustrated and depressed and overwhelmed at the thought of having to eliminate these foods. So I was wondering what kind of advice you guys have, or what motivated you to get started and to stick with it despite these, reservations that everybody kind of has going into it.
Me first?
Sure.
Well, I started with regular paleo, and so for me that was a helpful stepping stone to the AIP. I had a standard American diet before that, and so the switch to paleo was kind of a learning curve, and it helped me. I mean, it took me out of crisis, and it reduced my inflammation a lot, and my flares became a lot less frequent and a lot less intense. And so I stuck with that for about 5 months, and then I plateaued, and I was still flaring, and I was still in pain, and at that point I wanted that to stop, and I felt ready for the AIP. So that's one option for people who don't want to dive right in. You can try paleo first, and then, when you're ready, you're ready. And I just really wanted to feel better, and so finding your motivation and finding that place within yourself where you're ready to do what's necessary to feel better is key, and I think that's personal for each of us.
Just being ready, I keep telling people all the time is that I was a vegan for 10 years, and I had plenty of people challenge me on that. And, now knowing what I know, I agree with them that it wasn't the right diet for me, and that maybe I wasn't hurting myself any more than I would have been on the standard American diet, but it wasn't helping. And I was ready to acknowledge that and to try the AIP when I was ready. And if you had confronted me with that before I was ready, it wouldn't have happened and I wouldn't have been successful. So I do think that's really important, is when you're ready, you'll know, and it'll happen.
Yeah, really good points about being ready. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I don't know, I guess about 3 weeks before I made the transition, I kind of had a public declaration that I was not going to accept feeling this way anymore. And making it so public was pretty motivational. It made me feel like, boy, I better really do this. I better really make this happen. So yeah, being ready. I think, there's other ways to do it too. You don't have to go all in. In my group, SAD to AIP in 6, I teach people how to transition over a 6-week period from standard American diet all the way to autoimmune protocol. So if a person feels like they are ready, they want to feel better, but they just can't swallow that whole elephant, I can teach you how to eat the elephant piece by piece.
And I did, like you, Christina, transitioned from nearly a decade of veganism, and when I was ready, when I was mentally ready, was not ready, or wasn't really when I was actually ready to transition to eating meat 3 meals a day, because I hadn't eaten meat in so long. I had also had a lot of aversion to cooking and preparing and purchasing meat. So there was definitely this transition phase where I was weaning off of foods that I had been eating. I had already been gluten-free. I was eating a lot of plants, but I was eating a lot of beans and a lot of grains. So I weaned off of those at the same time that I kind of weaned into like more of a vegetarian paleo with eggs and fish, and then figured out that the eggs weren't really working and that I really needed to go full AIP. And I waited until my tomatoes were done for the year in my garden, because I just really wanted to eat all of them. And yeah, so there was a lot of transition to get to the point of AIP, and I think mentally I was ready a lot quicker than I actually implemented everything, but now hindsight, I wish I had gone all in sooner, but it is what it is,
I'm going to sound like a curmudgeon-y old man when I say this, back in my day, but when we all got started 3, 4, 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information on the AIP out there, and really the only one providing any consistent information and recipes was Sarah Ballantyne. And nowadays, Sarah has the Paleo Approach Approved program, which you can find on her blog, which basically guarantees that the blogs that are in that part of that program, and products and books and ebooks, are compliant with the guidelines laid out in her books, The Paleo Approach and The Paleo Approach Cookbook. I counted today, and there are 30 approved blogs and 13 approved ebooks and books, which is phenomenal. Like 5 years ago, 30 is just mind-boggling. So nowadays, it's easier to get started than it ever was before, but that doesn't mean it's easy. There's still that huge emotional and mental hurdle you got to get over. But we do have all these resources for it now. There's meal plans, there's recipes, there's cookbooks, there's practical advice and emotional support and coaching programs like Angie's. So the resources are out there, and that page can help you find them. That's the first place I send people to if they're looking to get started and looking for more resources to help them out. What are some of the favorite resources you guys have for newbies, or something that you wish you'd had when you got started?
My favorite resource is actually some of the local in-person meetup groups that have sprung up. So there's been a lot of, we have a big history of online support for AIP. Obviously, that's kind of how a lot of us bloggers started doing what we're doing, meeting each other, was networking in different various groups, maybe Facebook, etc. And lately, there have been so many people interested in AIP that there's actually more than one person in a city that actually is doing the diet. Which, back in the day, it was like, wow, someone else in the country is doing it. Now it's actually, I think our Pacific Northwest group has almost 1,000 members, which is like incredible. So, you can find these groups. Angie and I post them weekly on our Facebook page, which is Facebook/Autoimmune Paleo, and also our website, autoimmune-paleo.com, in the community update post. And we do this as a service to help the community connect with each other. And I think that that is one of the most incredible, life-changing ways that we can really get this movement continuing, is by getting people out there, meeting each other in person, and talking about their struggles, sharing food, and some really amazing, beautiful things happen at these in-person meetups. And so I just think they're awesome.
That's fantastic. I had no idea it was getting that big to do things in person. I have social anxiety still, and it's better than it was before paleo, but it's still like I don't want to meet people in person. I get really nervous. So the online communities were a huge help for me because I'm very comfortable talking to people online and getting to know people that way before I meet them in person, like you guys. But I had no idea, and that's 1,000 people is unbelievable. That's fantastic, and I'm sure that's a tremendous resource for people. Awesome.
In a small town, so I'm the only person to my knowledge doing it here. So I would love a meetup group, so that's awesome that the cities have them. But I am really grateful for the online ones, so I'll just go ahead and name a few of those. So of course the Paleo Mom has a website, right? Is it the paleomomcommunity.com? That's correct, right? Yeah. And then on Facebook, there's the Paleo Approach community, and then I help moderate. It's called an Autoimmune Paleo Recipe Group. So if you just search for those, you can find those online. And I think there's an AIP support group on Facebook too. So that really helps if you're in a small town like me. And let me see, one other thing I started on my blog, it's the Recipe Roundtable, and it's where all of these fabulous 30 and more bloggers link up AIP-friendly recipes every week, and it is really cool. Like Christina said, when we first started, it was really kind of almost demoralizing to browse paleo blogs because 95% of the recipes contained ingredients we couldn't eat, and so that's not very fun. And now you can browse all these blogs with gorgeous photography, really creative recipes, coming up with, it's just such a wide variety, everything from comfort food to, how to make organ meats palatable if you're afraid of them. And so just really take advantage of those blogs out there. But yeah, on my blog every week, it's kind of like a gateway to all those other blogs. So that's one option for you.
The things that I find myself encouraging my clients to go out and take a look at over and over, and I know this is going to sound like a plug for all these ladies' wonderful books, but it's true. I send them to Christina to get some menu plans. Christina has an AIP 28-day menu planning book. It has all the shopping lists and recipes, and that's all done for you. And she also has one that combines low FODMAP with AIP for folks who are also dealing with like SIBO and things like that. Because I find that a lot of my clients are really overwhelmed by the planning and preparation initially. And so having that bit done for them at such an affordable price with Christina's product is great. So I find myself doing that. I send people to Eileen's book pretty often when they're ready to do reintroductions. If they're at that stage, if we get that far, and they want to kind of do that step by step and have recipes laid out to help them do that process, I kind of do that. And we got Mickey's book out there. Nobody can beat that book. I send everybody to that book. So, those were some of the original resources, and they're still working really well. They really help my clients and help guide them with the process. So those are kind of my good starters.
Yeah, absolutely. And also Eileen's latest breakfast ebook is just that answers one of the most commonly asked questions. After people ask, how do I do this? They ask, what do I eat for breakfast?
Yes, yeah. The breakfast book has been huge.
When I first got started, purging the pantry of all of the foods I would no longer be eating was a huge relief for me, and also really fun because I love cleaning and getting rid of clutter. But I know that's not always an option for people who have families. At the time I was living by myself, so I could do whatever I wanted. And then when Noah moved in, he brought his foods with him, and now we have stuff in the pantry that I don't really approve of, but it's there. So what kind of advice do you guys have for people either with or without families purging the pantry or stocking the pantry or kind of avoiding temptation in their own households?
My biggest tip is to start with a couple categories of purge. So there's kind of never foods, and those are going to be your gluten-filled foods, processed foods, anything with food chemicals, thickeners, stabilizers, foods that you're unlikely to eat ever again, and toss them. Don't even give them away, honestly. Just throw them away. The other category of food is going to be pantry items. So those are going to be things that you might include on like a nutrient-dense paleo-like approach once you reintroduce successfully some foods, but you don't necessarily need to throw them away because they're not toxic foods like gluten or sugar-filled foods would be. They're fresh ingredients. So that might be things like cumin spice or chili powder or some nuts and seeds or your almond butter. It's still good to pack them up and put them somewhere where you're not going to find them. So even if you keep them in your pantry in a sealed box or something, you want to remove them from temptation. And then the next step is just to fill your space with a bunch of things that are autoimmune protocol compliant. So that could be AIP-friendly snacks, olives, jerky, Epic bars, and then lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, and all the ingredients that you would use to make AIP-compliant foods. So that's where I would start.
The only thing it made me think of is, you eat what's in your house. I mean, that's just the way it is. You absolutely do not want an empty fridge or an empty cabinet, because if you come home and there's not something delicious for you to eat, you're either going to go out and get something you shouldn't, or you're going to eat what your roommate has in their cupboard that isn't good for you either. And so I'll do a little plug for Mickey. So she has an awesome free batch cooking video that you can find on YouTube, and she makes just a ton of stuff in a really short period of time and shows you how to get that done. And so to do batch cooking at least once a week so that you have some really easy to grab stuff in your fridge and freezer, I think is a recipe for success.
I encourage people to do the process step by step a lot. Just like adopting AIP can be done slowly over a number of weeks or even months if it needs to be that long for you. But so I usually encourage folks to start with the first batch of things. Usually I in my groups I start with gluten, grains, and alcohol. So their first week, there's a day where they take an hour or two and they clean all the grains out and they clean all the booze out. And I tell them to box the booze up and give it to their friends for a future party fund, and take the grain products to the food pantry or just toss them, blast some music while you're doing it, and think of this as a little bit of a celebration. This is kind of closing one door and opening a new, healthier door.
So for me, speaking of temptation, being tempted to cheat wasn't so much about wanting that food really, really bad as much as it was kind of feeling sorry for myself and wanting to be like everyone else and just have French fries instead of a salad or soup or whatever. But I also very clearly remembered being so sick that I wanted to die. And I started to think of myself, of cheating as literally shooting myself in the gut. I would die horribly and very slowly, and if I wanted to die, I should just do something more direct than French fries. And if I wasn't ready to do that, then I just needed to, as Angie would say, put on my big girl panties. And I know that's really grim and kind of, the tough love and stuff, and it's not for everyone. But I responded really well to the tough, soft love to really get my ass in gear and stick with it. What kind of mental or emotional or actual physical support, or what kind of things did you guys find helpful to have you stick with it and fight temptation at the beginning?
So my husband was on board with me, so that makes a huge difference. He let me make actually the whole house AIP. Now, as I say that, he eats, I'm not kidding, cherry Coke and hot dogs and Hostess pies at work. So it's not like I control what he eats, but he didn't want to sabotage my healing, and he knew my body was very different than his body. So even though those foods aren't good for him, they're not going to set off an autoimmune flare. So that was huge for me to be able to not be surrounded by foods I couldn't eat in the house. If you are in the opposite situation, there are some great bloggers out there who've written about that, and I'm going to give a shout out to Michaela of Slightly Lost Girl, she's written about her non-paleo husband quite a few times, who she loves dearly, and how they navigate that in a way that lets him be who he is without sabotaging her quest for healing. So if you Google it, you'll find the blog posts about that. But you need to find support somewhere. So if it's not your husband, friends, family, if you're surrounded by naysayers in real life, then hopping on the internet and finding people there to support you, I really think is essential. I don't think you can do this by yourself. Totally by yourself. I mean, we're the ones who make the choices on what we're going to eat, but if we don't have one person in our corner, it's a pretty lonely road. And so that's the beautiful thing about the internet is you really can find those people in your corner. And Angie's groups are pretty much all about that too. So a little plug for her, she's mentioned it a few times, but her online support groups, there's 20 people who go through it at the same time. And so that's really nice. If you have no support at home, checking out those support groups is a really good idea.
Eileen's totally right about the support. Having good, strong support networks is part of the lifestyle process of AIP. Building into your life these strong networks of people that you can rely on is part of what will strengthen you overall to fight autoimmune disease anyway. So that's actually the very first thing we do in my group. New groups started yesterday, and their first 2 days are all about picking out their real life people who they can count on for support, and then starting to form solid bonds within the group for some online support. So that's it is a totally really important step. I was lucky to have that pretty built into my life from the start, so that helped me. The other thing that I did was throw some temper tantrums in the beginning. Honestly, I had a few moments where I screamed and literally threw a fit in my kitchen about all the things I couldn't eat anymore and how challenging it was to do that. I had a few moments where I just walked out of the restaurant. I was out with people and I just couldn't handle it. It was really isolating and I just had to leave and have my little pity party. And then I put on my big girl panties and I gave myself some tough love. The reality is that I wanted to feel better and nobody except for me is in control of that. So I think Christina's point about, giving yourself a tough talk is probably worth it when it's time to really dig down.
Yeah, well, one of my friends said it really well, and she actually, I definitely had a hard time in the beginning trying to wrap my mind against or around eating exactly the opposite as how I had been eating before. And one of my friends, actually, his mom transitioned to AIP, and he didn't tell anyone, she didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell her son. She just started eating differently, and it wasn't hard for her, and she lost 60 pounds and went off 14 medications, and was just this crazy success. You hear about these odd people that just kind of experience this immediate success, and when I asked her, how she got the mental energy, because she didn't really seem to be connecting with the community. She didn't really seem to be connecting with me, even though I'm in her life and I'm somewhat close to her. And she said, what did I have to lose but my pain and suffering? I just said, I'm going to do this, and I did it, and it worked, and I don't need to, be a baby about it. And I just found so much strength in hearing her story and hearing her say that we're not all like that. I'm not like that, but it is pretty remarkable when we have, the will to do something really gnarly. We can make it happen, And
that was, pretty much my outlook was, what do I have to lose? I was at the point where I wanted to die. I have nothing to lose because I am at rock bottom. And, when I think back on it, just those moments where I felt weak and was really wanting a cinnamon roll so bad or whatever, it's just food. It's food. It's temporary. It goes away so fast. It's gone. And then your health is forever. So, it's not worth it. It's not worth giving up your health for, at least for me. Maybe somebody out there feels that way. But, I think for most of us, we can say at the end of the day, our health is more important, and it's totally worth it. All the work we put in and all the discipline we have pays off.
Can I say one thing quick? There's like five AIP cinnamon roll recipes out there now.
Going back to kind of what I said earlier at the very beginning was that when I got started, I felt like I was not really that deprived because I was adding in all these new foods and stuff. And I feel like looking back, the only things I really needed, I had, which was basic information about what to eat and what not to eat, which I got from Sarah. and the desperation to feel better, even if it meant giving up every food ever. And my sense of adventure in the kitchen. I loved developing new recipes and trying to come up with AIP versions of some of my old favorite foods or foods that I'd never had or heard of before from all around the world, and trying to make them delicious and fun and new. And I think in my first year on the AIP, I didn't really have the same meal twice, and they weren't all winners. A lot of them just sucked. But I had a sense of adventure, and I really enjoyed cooking. At least I enjoyed eating different food. I've never been a huge fan of cooking, but I love eating, and I think that really helps. What about you guys? What were the things that you feel were really important for you to have at the beginning, or maybe you wish you'd had when you got started? Mentally, emotionally, any final little tidbits that we haven't already covered?
Yeah, I think I wish that I had understood the concept of nutrient density sooner. So I think when I started AIP, I was really focusing on removing those foods. And I mean, that's normal because when you look at the foods to avoid list, it's kind of really overwhelming, and just figuring out a food that is technically AIP is like really hard. You know, when you're not used to thinking from the perspective of what can I eat versus what can't I eat. So in the beginning, it was just a struggle to get food on the table. But then once that wasn't hard anymore, I think nutrient density was this new concept, and that's actually when I started healing. So I plodded along for a few months on technically compliant AIP, eating, a vegan plus, a little bit of meat, and it wasn't really healing my body. And it wasn't until I really started eating larger quantities of meat, which compared to a regular meal wasn't anything ridiculous, but compared to not eating meat for 10 years, it was a lot. Eating red meat, having pate, incorporating bone broth and everything, eating more fish and shellfish. I mean, those were things that I feel like really helped me turn my health around, and so I wish that I would have kind of taken that into my protocol from the beginning.
I mean, the things that helped me get going were, I felt like if this somewhat restricted amount of food or kinds of food is what I have left, which, by the way, everybody out there, it's not that restrictive, actually. It feels that way, and I know some of you are out there shaking your head and going like, curse that, Angie, it is too restrictive. It's actually not that restrictive. I eat such a wide variety of delicious food. I don't feel restricted at all anymore. But in the beginning, in comparison to what you see on restaurant menus and what you see in the grocery store compared to what you actually put in your cart, it feels really restrictive. And I guess I just felt like, okay, if I'm going to have to be this restrictive, then I'm going to pour a ton of energy into making what I have available the most delicious, amazing food ever. And I worked really hard at it, and it paid off. I really love the food I eat at home. I would rather eat at home now. My husband would rather eat at home now. It really motivated me to put that kind of effort and energy into it. I think I wish I would have recognized sooner that what I was missing about the foods that were now eliminated really was about other associations. It was about emotional connections. It really wasn't about those foods. It was about the connection to those foods. I'm from Montana. There's this huge microbrew scene in Montana, and I'm a celiac. I'm never going to drink a beer again. And I mourned that so hard, but then finally I came to this point where I was like, oh, it's about all the fun, cool things that I feel are connected to that. And those things don't have to end, and those memories don't have to end. I'm just not going to include beer with it anymore. Or whatever it is, find that thing. Maybe it's that special food at Christmas time. I know a lot of people on AIP struggle a lot around the holidays and all those special holiday foods. It's probably about the connection and the things that are special associated with it. It's not actually the thing that's special isn't in the food. I wish I would have made that connection for myself sooner.
That's absolutely, yeah, and I'm just making that connection right now. Is that I mentioned cinnamon rolls a second ago, and that was my family's like special occasion, Christmas morning kind of treat or birthday treat or whatever. And I know that if I had a cinnamon roll again, it wouldn't be about the taste. I'd be like, oh, this is too sweet. This is, whatever, because I've had that experience with other gluten-free, safer foods, but I gotta find something to replace that, that going back to my childhood memory. I mean, you can't replace childhood memories, but I gotta come up with a new tradition for Christmas morning or something that is safer.
I agree with everything all of you guys have said. The one thing I would say is the AIP is about more than just the food. It's really about life too. And so the 2 bits of advice in the beginning is a lot of times for comfort we reach for food. And so the irony when you're on the AIP, if you're feeling stressed out about the restrictions, your instinct is going to be to reach for the food you're not supposed to be eating. And so to, in advance, think of other things that are non-food related that comfort you. And even write them down in a list and put them on your fridge. And so when you have that moment, when you are having a temper tantrum and you're crying or you're screaming or just having a rough day, you still deserve comfort, just do it through something beyond food. So so that's from the comfort standpoint. And then the other thing is, life is meant to be enjoyed. And Angie is actually a really good role model for this, is that life is more than just paleo and life is more than just autoimmune disease. And so to remember that and make sure you make time in your life for something else. And I'll say I have to make an effort at this myself, especially as an autoimmune paleo blogger. It's like my whole world can be autoimmune paleo. And that's not really healthy. That's kind of a small bubble. And so, to find something else you enjoy. Angie's teaching herself to play the banjo. I think that's awesome. I actually set myself a task this month where I take a photo a day, and get this, ladies, it can't have anything to do with paleo. So no food photos, no taking a picture of me with my feet in my clay bath photos, or all that typical stuff. Instead, it's like, okay, what in my life is important to me that has nothing to do with these 2 things, just so you don't lose your whole identity in this, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. My kind of motto is, get fed, get well, get out of the kitchen, because like I said, I don't like cooking. I love eating, but I don't like cooking. I don't want to spend all day slaving over a dish, even if it's going to be delicious. I just want to get back to my life. And, my hobbies include reading books and playing video games and playing board games with my friends and family, which is nothing terribly exciting or educational or enlightening, but it's fun and it's relaxing, and I want to have more time to do that as opposed to identifying myself as a sick person and taking care of myself as a sick person. And so I agree, that's, it's not who we are, it's not what we are. It may be what we do for like however many hours a day we have to cook or clean or whatever, or meditate or do yoga or take care of ourselves in ways that we haven't before in the past, but that doesn't mean those activities are bad things. We just need to remember that they don't define us. That we can make time for our friends and our social lives or our hobbies, and that's what's really important, being healthy enough to pursue those things. And also, somebody brought up kind of like missing beer or missing other foods and associating things with them and finding, replacing those associations. There are actually maybe not perfect replacement foods that are AIP compliant, but one of the things when all of my friends got together and we'd have a game night and all the boys would be drinking, there'd be beer and whiskey or whatever, and they'd be, having a good time, I would have kombucha. And I can't do that anymore because I have yeast sensitivity and kombucha makes me really sick now. But back in the day, that was a really nice thing to have, and I miss it a lot. And now I just do just a seltzer water or something sparkly and bubbly that is just water. But any other kind of, quick comfort food tricks that you guys might have? Anything else you might want to keep on hand?
I think I just tried to focus on other things, to be honest. I think I tried to, enjoy that I felt good again, and, like you were just saying, spend time with my family and do things that I hadn't had the energy to do in like 4 or 5 years, and try to focus actually away from food a little bit, especially because so much of my time was focused on preparing food. I think I tried to go, oh my God, I feel like going for a walk, I feel like laughing, I feel like smiling, I think I concentrated on those things.
I think going for a walk when you're fighting a food craving or emotional quandary of some kind that's advice I hear a lot, is to just go for a walk for 10, 20 minutes and then probably you'll be over it.
And I'm reluctant to say this, but hey, let's just be honest. So I think I had a cookie a day during my first few months AIP. And the only reason I'm reluctant to say that is there are a ton of AIP dessert recipes out there now. So if you wanted to, you could actually binge on AIP desserts every day. And I'm just going to tell you straight up, that's going to sabotage you too. So that's not what I'm talking about. And now I hardly ever crave, AIP desserts. But in the beginning, I think I needed, like I felt like I was giving up a lot that I resented giving up at the time. And I felt like I needed a treat every day, and I'm one of those people who can stop at one cookie. So if you're not one of those people, know that about yourself, and it might be better for you to have a special occasion dessert more rarely. If you are someone who can stop at a cookie a day and that's enough to keep you AIP strict, that didn't sabotage me at all. It was a small cookie. So, you do what you got to do. And I will say that the other thing for me is that my flares went away when I went AIP. And so then I think when you start seeing improvement, your resentment goes down. And I'm not saying everyone has resentment when they start, but I did, kind of like Angie was talking about that temper tantrum in the kitchen. And I didn't like it. I didn't like giving up all these foods. It felt like a mean thing someone was making me do, even though I was making the choice myself. And then when my flares went away, I was like, okay, so this isn't just to be mean. This is to help me. And then as I did my reintroductions, I figured out which foods I had to keep avoiding and what they did to my body and why they're eliminated on the AIP. So it gets better. I guess that's the other thing I just want to say. It gets better and it does get easier. The longer you do it, both because you see results and you develop new habits that make it easier to do.
I also wanted to just throw out that fruit is kind of a good, before AIP and paleo, I didn't like strawberries. I thought they were too tart and bitter. And now they're my favorite sweet treat. Like they're perfect. They hit the spot. And I am one of those people that used to binge on sweets a lot. So I will probably eat way too many strawberries and wind up with a tummy ache. So I don't do it that often because I know I can't control myself. But it is, when you just got to have something. I mean, I love strawberries. I love fruits. That's a really good sweet treat for, if the alternative is to have a baked good of some kind that you don't tolerate.
When I first started AIP, back then I was a chef for a living. I worked in people's households, and, cooking is actually something that I love, and sharing food with others is something that I love, and a way that I can show the people around me that I love them. And so I find it really isolating that I was preparing all this food for myself and keeping it to myself and, not able to eat out or anything. But then something changed when I started inviting my friends over and started sharing food with them. And it was interesting because these are people that don't need to eat gluten-free or AIP, but they still enjoyed the meal because I made it kind of like a project to figure out how to cook delicious food that didn't really seem like sick person food or recovery food or whatever. And that was something that was a major breakthrough for me and definitely made it a lot easier to be AIP long term, realizing that I can still enjoy food with other people.
I super second what Mickey just said. I forgot about that in the beginning, but yeah, I started throwing dinner parties more often and inviting people over because I couldn't easily go out. There wasn't, a lot of places that I could safely eat at. And I love all of my friends. They're wonderful people who would never intentionally try to get me sick, but their kitchens weren't safe for me either. And so it was great to have them over. And, it's a lot of work for one night to host a bunch of people, but it was so fun. And connecting in your homes over food you cooked yourself does something totally new to your relationships. It changes the nature of your friendships and it deepens them, and it's really special. That's where the Dinner Club community cookbook would be a great thing for people to access if they want to explore that area.
Like we said earlier, it's important to have support and community locally and in your own household. So that is a really great way to build that, is meet people.
It's not a life sentence. AIP is a way to manage your illness, autoimmunity, some kind of chronic illness, whatever whatever reason you're coming to it for, and hopefully it's going to help you manage it successfully, and you're going to have a renewed health and enjoy your life. I'm so much happier than I was before. It's not just my physical health, my emotional and mental health changed dramatically. And I don't think about it anymore. We're all on here talking about it, and we all have blogs about it, and we write books about it, but actually I don't think any of us probably think about it that much anymore. I have an autoimmune disease. I'm not an autoimmune disease. I manage my autoimmune disease. It doesn't manage me. That's it. It will change your life in really big ways, and it's totally worth it.
I'll just, you can do this. I guess that's the only thing I'll say is that I know a lot of people are afraid when they first see the protocol and they get overwhelmed and feel nervous about it. And just to tell you that you've got this. You have it within yourself to do this protocol, to do it well, and to feel better. And we're all here to help you do that. So we've got your back.
My final thought would just be to really make a point to assess where you're at and make a step in the right direction. So depending on where you're at, what level of disability you are, what level of tissue damage you have with your autoimmune disease, there's a lot of varying gray areas between how someone can apply this information. Maybe going gluten-free for you is a really big deal and you need to start there instead of trying the elimination diet first. Or maybe you're highly motivated, you're very sick, you have lots of time, and you just want to cook and you want to get in the kitchen, you want to get it done. Like it doesn't, both of those answers is right. So don't, if us sharing our experience tells you anything, it should be that this is your process and you can do it however you do it, and it's not wrong unless you just run away.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I love chatting with you. It leaves me feeling all warm and fuzzy to be in such great company and to have such great discussions about this thing that nobody else understands who hasn't done it themselves. So thank you again for coming. I want to thank all of our viewers for watching and let them know that ladies' blogs, their website addresses are in the video description below. So be sure to check them out and see what kind of cool things they're up to, and be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the discussion, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to come back and see more. And again, just thank you all for watching. Thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you next time. Okay, sorry. Brain fart for like a second there. Also, I had some coffee this morning and I'm feeling like, woo. And I'm gonna